control. Breach in 5, 4, 3.
What's up, guys? I'm Uncle Freedom, coming to you on another glorious and well-deserved day off, and today we're going to take a look at the fourth and final video in the Minutemen's primary rifle in the Minutemen layout series. So if that sounds fun and interesting to you, go ahead and like, subscribe, tell a friend, share this video. The channel is growing. It's awesome. If you're looking to support the channel, head on down to the description box below where you'll find a link that'll take you to Linktree, my account, and that will give you access to all of the affiliates of the channel. People like Dark Angel Medical, Gun Mag Warehouse, Coltac, 100 Concepts, Dark Angel. If you were going to do it anyway and you use those links, it supports the channel, and for that, I thank you. If you want to get in touch with me, it's at Uncle Freedom 213 on Facebook or Instagram, or Uncle Freedom 213 at Outlook.com. So, the Minutemen rifle. If you're new to what's going on here and you ended up here first, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. I'll leave a link up here that'll take you to the Minutemen layout video series, the playlist. The first video in that series is going to be kind of the 30,000 foot view of what we're doing. And this is video number 4. The first video, we actually covered the requirements of the rifle system that we would want to in place as the primary fighting rifle of the Minutemen. We also took a look in video 2 at ammo considerations, projectile picking, flexibility of cartridges themselves and the firearm systems that they could be used in to help you make a better informed decision as far as what would better suit your needs depending on your environment and perceived mission. The third video, we went over build list stuff, things that matter that you may not have thought of, what the difference is between some of the actual components that go into building the rifle. And today we're going to look at add-ons. We're going to talk about those things that modify or enhance your rifle's capability that we bolt on to these damn things, and they look really cool. So, without further ado, the first thing we're going to talk about in here is your LAMs, or your laser aiming modules, or your laser, or your PEC-15, or your ATPL, or your BE Myers Mall. Depends on what you want to do. I'm not going to deep dive this too much because there will be a future video where I talk about night vision itself, as well as some of the components that we would need, things like a vampire light on an axe mount on your helmet. But we're talking about things that are going to interface with your rail, which is one of the reasons in the previous video I talk about how important that rail system is, as being a stable platform that will hold zero. Most everything we're going to talk about is going to mount to a rail of some kind or your receiver. But things we need to look at, kind of the quick view of laser aiming modules, which is, first off, visible lasers. So in the realm of laser aiming modules, you have 3 things that really exist, and that is a visible laser, an IR laser or infrared, which is on a spectrum that you can't see with the naked eye, or an IR floodlight. So when we talk about visible lasers, that sounds really cool, right? The only problem is visible lasers aren't always visible. If it's broad daylight and you put your red dot on somebody's red shirt, that laser doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't. Same thing with IR. And I'm gonna touch on something very, very, very important in the next part of this that has to do with IR, kind of the same boat. But something you have to look at when we start talking about laser aiming modules is if you have a visible and an IR laser, one of the coolest things that exist in that realm is something known as slaved lasers, which would mean that if you zeroed your laser, which is going to be important because you're not going to zero for a converging zero. So that means that whatever distance you've decided to zero your laser at, you're not looking to make the bullet hit the laser. You're looking for the bullet to hit right where the laser would be in relation to your barrel. So whether that's directly over here, up a little bit, but having a slaved laser with a vis laser and an IR means you would zero your vis laser, which is much easier to do because you don't have to do it on night vision, and your IR laser would go with it as well. The other part of this is the IR flood, which is going to be an IR illuminator. It's going to act as a flashlight in the IR spectrum, allowing you to see better with nods and light up the area. However, because things like the FDA exist, we can't get full power PEC 15s, meaning most of the civilian stuff we can get our hands on is pretty anemic by comparison, unless you get one of those that fell off a truck. However, when we start talking about laser aiming modules, there's absolutely nothing in this world, in this realm, that is inexpensive. You can go ahead and open your wallet to get to this part and start going, because seeing in the dark is in fact a superpower that you can buy. So, food for thought. But on to the next part of this, something much more realistic for the vast majority of people, though night vision and IR stuff is a lot more prevalent, which is awesome, which means we've normalized it. And that's really cool to see, because 10 years ago, civilians owning nods, laser aiming modules, and suppressor was voodoo, witchcraft, taboo crap that only bad folks had with tax stamps. But it's become normal, which is awesome. That means we're winning. I mean, I feel like it, but that is a win. But your lights. We're talking about lights, white lights, specifically that you would mount to your firearm. So in this situation, I could mount a white light here. I could also mount a white light up here at 1, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, your light. But when we look at lights for a rifle, there are a couple of things we need to talk about in relation to lights. Now, I won't go super in depth because we're going to do a very dedicated light video, which is going to be awesome. And it's going to be filmed in the dark, which would be cool for me. But we're going to have two things you're going to hear, and I'm going to help answer some questions you may have heard about and don't know what it is, and maybe you're just embarrassed to ask because you feel like you should know. First one is going to be two words you're going to hear a lot, and that is candela and lumens. Lumens, point blank, is the raw output. That's how much available potential light is coming out of the emitter in the front of your light. And the next one is going to be candela. Candela is the intensity of that light thrown at a distance. So think of it this way. Lumens is how bright is it? Candela is how far does it go? If we're putting this on a rifle, odds are we want it to go a little farther. However, if it's a dedicated CQB gun, you might want not as far. So something to think about, which is the next part of this, which is flood versus throw. Throw is that candela. How far does it put light away in the intensity downrange, versus flood being how much room filling wall of light do we have. I will tell you that hitting someone in the eyes with a lot of lumens is uncomfortable. Hitting someone in the eyes with a ton of candela is painful, and you can control people with light. I will also tell you that I can easily achieve spill and flood from throw, because I can bounce that concentrated light beam off of things like a ceiling or crown molding or the baseboard and actually light up the room pretty effectively. But I can never take all of that flood and make it go further away. Just isn't how that works. So the next part of this, when we talk about it, is going to be the power supply that your light takes. This is pretty standardized for the most part. Most common stuff you're going to see is going to be in the modern lights is going to be an 18650. One of these batteries right here that you charge up. That's a high power, high volume system that's going to put out a lot of light. In 18650, you're also going to see pretty good battery life there. The next version is going to be CR123s, which has been the standby for a long time, usually with two CR123s and a light, but you're going to see kind of a downgrade in your battery capacity as well as your brightness, because you don't have as much raw power on tap. The next one's going to be a newer battery into the realm of lights, and that is like your 21700. It is a much fatter, longer battery. You're going to see that in a lot of the lights, like the new ProTac 2.0 from Streamlight, or the HLX, HLX Plus or HLX Turbo, I can't remember. 21700 is a big, fat, chunky battery with a ton of lifespan, giving you a lot of battery life with a lot of raw output. One of the baddest lights on the market right now that takes the 21700 is the Mod Light Hog. You're talking 150,000 candela and like 1,300 lumens. It's insane. But those batteries are also much more expensive than your standard 18650s. Just is what it is. And then you have kind of the last one, which isn't that popular, and for good reason, and that is something with an internal battery that is chargeable that is pretty much the sole realm of Olight. Now, Olight gets a bit of all kinds of a rap. Olight's task lights are actually pretty good. I've got them. But Olight's internal battery that you recharge with the little magnetic thing, that's not where it's at. And the reason that's not where it's at is it gets dark every day. And if you find yourself using your weapon light in a class or something for like 4 hours, you're going to kill that battery. And there is no just put a new battery in real quick. You have to go charge that thing to use it again. So it's not field serviceable, which for me is an immediate elimination from contention as something I'm going to put on my firearm. For what those cost, I can get into Streamlights and get really usable light. Right now, you can pick up the Streamlight HLX rail mount with a pressure pad for $100. That's awesome, right? That's a good light, 25,000 candela, 1,000 lumens, easily a good beginner entry-level light for a rifle. So outside of that, the next thing we're going to look at is going to be the pressure pad or mod button or whatever versus the tail cap activation. Tail cap activation would work more of when you would do this, you would reach up and actually interact with the tail cap versus having a pressure pad, which would allow you just to put your thumb down and activate the light on and off, allowing you to be momentary and use the light in a more efficient manner. But they have weak points as well. Pressure pads are notoriously more fragile, and you also run into the issue that it is very easy to activate that light when you don't want to. Tail clap is going to be much more durable, much more effective. It's going to be much more deliberate for you to turn it on, but it's also harder to turn on, which could be a pitfall all on its own. There is some weird stuff out there like the HRT AWL light. That's a really cool light. It's got an omnidirectional switch. No matter which direction you hit it, it actually turns the light on. It's got really good candela. Those are nice. They're pretty expensive though. And something else that we're going to think about when we talk about lights, that are going on a firearm specifically, is that less expensive lights are not potted. So when you start talking about really well-made weapon lights, like the dual fuel stuff from Surefire, the Cloud Rain 3.0, the Cloud Owl, the Mod Light 18650 with the OKW head, something like that, you're going to be talking about fully potted electronics, which means that when they wire all this cool stuff into the head of the light, they're actually going to encase that in like an epoxy resin, making it impossible for those wires to come loose from each other, giving you a much more durable and effective weapon light. So potting is where it is, but with a less expensive light, you're going to lose out on fully potted electronics compared to more expensive and more premium stuff like Cloud Defensive. But when we really look at this, so if I told you, like right now, you could buy the Streamlight ProTac 2.0, that is a 2,000 lumen weapon light with about 15,000 candela. The 2,000 lumen sounds amazing until I say something like 15,000 candela. That's the candela of a Streamlight TLR 1HL with twice the lumen output. But then if I told you something like the OKW 18650 is only like 690 lumens, but it's 69,000 candela. It is one of the most painful lights to look at. It has tons of throw, but even that one is becoming dated by the new versions of lights we have. Things like the Cloud Defensive Rain 3.0 with 100,000 candela and like 1,400 lumens, or even the new Mod Light Hog, where we're looking at over 1,000 lumens with well over 100,000 candela. It's incredible. But something else needs to be said about lights, and that is a giant reflector, right? So if you've ever like driven at night and your headlights have hit the headlights of another car that's off, or the taillights, you get that big reflection of light, right? You pick up on it. That is a reflector. This thing's job is literally to reflect light out, which means if I hit it with light, it's going to reflect that shit back at where it's coming from, giving away my position. So we need to be very hyper focused on our lights. Back in the day, we would put light caps on them. I've put tape on them before. but you need to have a solution. And right now, the best solution on the market for that is the 100 Concepts light caps. Those things are freaking awesome. Don't be dumb and write it on your suppressor because it will melt it, but I will tell you they're an excellent solution that will allow you to mitigate reflectivity off of your light. Something we also look at on optics, having a kill flash or something on there. We've done this in the military for years. Now having a ready-made solution attached to the light that allows us to kill the flash on a light. It also serves the other purpose. If it is dark outside and you are walking around and you ND this light, which means I turned it on when I didn't want it on, and it's super easy to do with a sensitive pressure pad, I might have just got everybody schwacked because I just turned on like a homing beacon in the middle of a dark forest when everybody else's eyes were adjusted to darkness. It's a real thing. It happens. NDs, in fact, in training and in schoolhouses that I've been through in a past life and a previous and current life, if you ND your white light, it is treated with just as much disdain as if you ND'd your rifle round into the ground in front of you. We don't take it lightly because it gets people killed. Light caps also mitigate that. So go check out 100 Concepts. Good folks over there, great people. And if you're looking for scrim for your helmet and your backpack, they are awesome, and I have mine. And their Chem Light bundle system is chef's kiss. That thing is awesome. So once we kind of look at that, I'm going to go back to this because I don't feel like people talk about it. I talk about it in the concealed carry thing. The scenario in which you would be the Minutemen, again, you would almost assuredly be facing what is known in the military world as a near-peer threat, which means it's not goat herders in the mountains of Afghanistan with a resupply program that is 12-year-old boys sprinting with water and magazines to men and man jams and goats, okay? We're talking about possibly having to face off against an enemy that is as close to us as having night vision and IR lasers, which would mean if you used your IR laser to light somebody up, they saw that too. It would also mean that they have night vision. They would also probably have that, and they would, more importantly and probably more dangerously, have access to something known as thermal. And if you only own a thermal and the only purpose you have of it is to learn how to hide from it, it's worth the money to buy a thermal. They're really cool. But something to keep in mind, in a scenario at which we would be Minutemen, whether it was our own government or an unfriendly government, it would almost assuredly be a near-peer threat, which is a world that is terrifying, and you should absolutely be afraid of that because that is scary crap. So moving on from your lights. Lights are important. Like I said, we'll touch it on a deep dive for the actual light portion of this later on in a different video. But now we're going to talk about a pretty big, giant, honking part of this, and that is your optics. Holy crap. Right? Like optics are everywhere. The manufacturing has come so far now. We can actually get super high quality, very accurate and durable optics in that $400 range, where that was an impossibility 7 years ago. But when we talk about optics, there's a bunch of different kinds, and we're going to kind of 30,000 views. Some of them hit some high points. Okay. So the first one and the most common one is going to be a red dot. It's a very simple optical device with non-magnified glass on the front and the back with a dot that projects onto the weird colored front lens you've got. And that dot gets zeroed and moved to where point of aim is point of impact when you look at the dot. Dots are awesome for a lot of stuff. They're very robust. The battery life is insane. Years most of the time for your battery life. They are ultra durable. They are very lightweight. They don't have parallax issues. You know, they have great night vision compatibility because you can turn them down low enough. They're very fast, very accurate in CQB environments, all the way out to 300 and 400 yards with a red dot. It's doable, right? Like it's totally doable with this super simple thing, but it can have issues with people with astigmatism. It'll leave that dot to look like a star, and that's not a good thing when we're trying to be precise. But if you're looking at an actual like red dot, it's itself, it's an LED that's projecting this light. But Aimpoint is kind of like the king of the heap there. But even in the more budget realms, people like SIG and HoloSun have proven to be reliable and really nice. And then moving away from the red dot, you would have the holographic sight, more commonly known by the brand name EOTech. That's a holographic weapon sight. But there are some problems with the holographic sight too, and that is the battery life is going to be atrocious. I've heard people say, I'll get an EOTech when the battery life gets up to 10,000 hours. That'll never happen. And the reason that'll never happen unless batteries get really good is because it's not an LED that we can control the power to the LED with. It's a laser, and lasers just eat power. The cool thing about EOTechs and stuff is we can make some really crazy, awesome reticles with a laser because we're just shining the laser into something. The laser is the power source. We can do crazy in-depth reticles with this, but the laser is super power hungry. But that laser also means that it is going to have the absolute clearest chef's kiss reticle under night vision. They are, bar none, the most awesome thing to shoot under nods is shooting a holographic sight. Now, there's really only two holographic sights that I recommend to anybody, and it is either the Vortex UH1 or the Huey, and that the EOTech. Most commonly, you're going to, you're talking about your same circle dot donut of death. That is also the same thing you will see on the UH1, which at first people say is annoying, but I will tell you that the larger reticle makes it easier to acquire under stress, but it also serves a different purpose, which is the far left and right sides of that donut of death is your lead on a running target. And the bottommost point of your donut of death is actually your CQB 7-yard N reticle that accounts for the mechanical offset of your sight above your actual bore. So it does have an actual purpose. And that's why it exists. And it's not just the dot, though they do make them with just the dot. So those are pretty awesome when you look at those. EOTech or Vortex. If you do the XPS, you're going to get an absolute co-witness height. If you do the EXPS, you're going to get a lower third with a dedicated night vision setting. The Vortex has dedicated night vision setting, and you only get the one thing. Both run off of a single CR123. Then we move on to the next and biggest, which is the Prism optics. They have since become recently very, very popular. However, Prism optics have been around for a very, very long time. Two of the most common and most widely known Prism optics that exist are the LCAN and the ACOG. Trijicon ACOG, the Advanced Combat Optical, and then the oh crap, the LCAN Spectre, really cool stuff. The LCAN actually has two prisms in it, so you would have a 1 and you would flip it and you would have a 4. The most common version you'll see of the ACOG is a 4 power. Now here is the problem with prisms, some goods and bads. If this is what you're looking at, can be 1 power, they could be 2 power, 3 power, 4 power, 6 power, 7 power. You can get some crazy stuff for a prism optic. However, they're almost always going to be an etched reticle, which means that even without a battery in it, the reticle is still visible, much like the crosshair in your granddaddy's old Leupold scope that he used deer hunting. You can still see that reticle, which means it's usable even with no electronics, which would make it pretty useful in that EMP world. But it also means if your battery dies, it doesn't matter. But there's also usually a secondary system. The ACOG was really famous for this, because the ACOG used tritium to light up the actual etched reticle, or that fiber optic stripe on top to power that reticle that we always had to cover with electrical tape because it was too damn bright. The other thing you're going to see that is going to be a pain with a prism optic, though, is your eye relief sucks. We look at a holographic sight or a red dot, I could be as far away from that thing or right up on top of it, weird positions, it doesn't matter. With a prism optic, that is not the case. You need to be in that spot every time. Otherwise, you're going to not have a sight picture. So that is where prism optics fall short, but they are incredibly durable. And if it was kind of an end of the world optic, you really can't go wrong with an ACOG. Next up from that is going to be something that is kind of the newest hotness in recent years, and that is the LPVO, or the low powered variable optic. These are optics that you're going to see in the initial generations of 1 to 4 power. Now, more commonly, it is 1 to 6 and 1 to 8. And now we are even at 1 to 10 power. However, while that sounds really cool, LPVOs either optimize and make their 1 power really good, so it's red dot like, or they're going to make sure that the upper echelon of magnification is really good and crystal clear, which means that your 1 power is going to suck. There's no free lunch in this. Something to think about, though, when we look at this is being great on a high magnification means we're lacking at one, but being great at one means we're lacking at the higher magnification. And if I'm putting magnification on a rifle, I want the magnification. Something else when we start talking about LPVOs is we are actually, now we're into the realm that we can have first focal plane or second focal plane optics. This is an important thing, and I'll kind of Barney this down for you. If we have a first focal plane optic, if we turn the volume, the magnification all the way down, your reticle will be very small and unusable, mainly just being a dot. But if I dial it all the way up, that reticle actually expands into the view with me, giving me a fully usable reticle. You see this a lot with BDCs or like a actual milling reticle, like a Griffin or something like that. In a second focal plane, no matter what magnification level I'm on, the image gets bigger or smaller, but the reticle stays exactly the same. Here's the pitfall to both. If I am running a second focal plane optic and I am at magnification of 3 and it is a milling reticle, my measurements are inaccurate because it is set to be accurate only at 1 magnification. First focal plane, if I'm on 3, those measurements are accurate. If I'm on 8, those measurements are accurate. I can mill out reticles and observe things and do what I need to do with that kind of a reticle in a first focal plane. Most of the second focal plane stuff you'll see in an LPVO is going to be a BDC styled deal, which would be things like your ACSS or the Advanced Combat Sighting System that is made so popular by Primary Arms. It was in the EOTech for a long time. So second focal plane is really good for a combat rifle because we're not so concerned with milling out distances and stuff. And it's really effective because it's always the same. However, now we have to talk about the BDC. You see this in everything, or the bullet drop compensator, or the ballistic drop compensator. Somebody says it's the ballistic drop calculator. That is not what that is. But you see this kind of a reticle in the EXPS 3-2 or the 3-4, where you would have an initial aiming dot, and then you would have a second dot that was supposed to be 500 meters. You would see it on the 4, where you had 4 dots. You see it in the Romeo 4 from SIG, where you would have 4 additional dots down in there. The ACSS reticle, where you basically had the horseshoe with the chevron, and then you had a post that went down, and it kind of had wind dots for 5 and 10 miles an hour. And it was labeled out like, you know, here's your 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Here's something to keep in mind with a bullet drop compensator, though. Those bullet drop compensators are specifically designed to work with 1 round at 1 velocity. For example, the ACOG with the ACSS reticle is specifically designed for the velocity of M855 out of a 14.5 barrel. That is what it's made to do. If you are shooting a 12-inch barrel, it is not going to line up. If you are shooting a 20-inch barrel, it is not going to line up. If you're using 193 or Mark 262, it is not going to line up. That doesn't mean it's unusable. It just means it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. But this happens in all of them that we use. So what you actually end up having to do is, if we're going to do this, like the EXPS 3.2, one of my favorite EOTechs, if I take that and I run it, for example, if I am zeroed out at a 36-yard zero with 77 grain Match Kings through that rifle with the first dot, my second dot is 390 yards. There you go. So that you actually have to do that, and that is known as formulating and getting your own dope, or data on previous engagements, data on personal equipment. Dope is something you have to have. You cannot just take it as what it is inside of the optic. You actually have to go verify this stuff, which brings me to one very important thing that doesn't get done in bullet drop compensators, and that is you have to true your BDC, which would mean if I was looking at my rifle and I had zeroed my rifle at 100 yards, point of aim, point of impact at my tip, I would then go out to like 300 or 400 yards and put the actual BDC where it's supposed to be, and I would make a shot, and then I would adjust my stuff again so that my impact at that distance is right where it's supposed to be, and then I would come back and shoot at 100. That is known as truing your bullet drop compensator, something that most people don't do. But you need to just remember that a bullet drop compensator is not going to be accurate with all bullets. It is not a turnkey solution, and you will still have to figure out what those actual drops mean for the bullet in your rifle, because velocity matters. Which brings me to my next part, something you will see very commonly with prism optics, especially the ACOG. A very common thing was the ACOG with the Trijicon RMR piggybacked on it at 12 o'clock. You see it with LPVOs with a micro red dot mounted at 12, or even an aimpoint T2 or a 45-degree offset micro red dot, giving you the capability to be at 6 power and quickly rotate over and have up close engagements with that red dot. This is a super effective and awesome thing, but both of them have a little bit of a hitch in your giddy up. If you have your micro red dot mounted at 12, you might not be able to see your thing. Also, if you start turning it off to the side and you're shooting on like a VTAC barricade, there's nobody that said you're going to be able to see through your red dot through that barricade. Food for thought. It is much faster. I will tell you that piggybacking or offsetting a micro red dot or something like a T2 is fantastic for magnified prism optics because I have the ability to look out further, but I also have the ability to engage up close. So having that offset or the piggybacked gives me quick target engagement, and it complies my magnified accuracy if I find myself suddenly needing to make an up close shot. Which leads me to the next one, which is magnifiers. So magnifiers are kind of all the rage, man. 3-power magnifier behind a Neotech, 5-power magnifier behind a Neotech, putting a magnifier behind your red dots, whatever, right? Here's the thing though. So like your prism and your LPVO, all of the benefits of the red dot you still get to keep, and you get fixed and removable magnification. I can take it off, I can leave it on, I can take it out of the way, I can actually look through it. But something you need to keep in mind when we start talking about magnification in a fighting primary rifle system, unless your job says sniper or DMR, and we're using a much more powerful optic to shoot at longer distances, and even then, magnification can, in fact, help you shoot better, but more than anything, it helps you see better. Remember, a large part of what you do in anything dealing with guns and having to shoot at stuff is known as PID, or positive identification. Nobody gives a shit what you thought you saw. It only matters what really was there. Magnification will help you see what's really there. So that's super important. Something else to keep in mind when we talk about magnifiers is magnification in a high candela light, even something 80,000 candela like this MCH. I can now make PID with that light in the dark at like 200 and 300 yards. Right? It's incredible. High candela light with a decent magnifier, and now I can do it. Most of the time when we start talking about magnifiers or something like that, or a 6-powered optic onto something like a fighting rifle, we are honestly talking about using the magnifier to obtain and gather information that allows us to make a better informed decision on whether or not we should be shooting. And if we had to shoot, we can, but more than likely, 9 times out of 10, you're going to use that magnification for PID and information, not necessarily for shooting. It's just very important to understand the connotation that just because you put magnification on your rifle does not mean you're going to shoot better. You're going to see a whole lot better, but if you still suck, you suck. You just suck with magnification. And the last part of this we're going to talk about is optic height. It can absolutely make you faster. So when we talk about optics, we'll talk about the three primary optic heights. We are talking about absolute co-witness, which means on a standard A2 front sight post, if I put my red dot on, it co-witnesses perfectly through the rear sight and to the front. We could do lower third, which drops that iron sight down into the lower third of my glass, or we can do like a 193, which is a very tall mount, like a Unity. Now, those do have some benefits. If I have a higher mount, I personally run lower 1/3 co-witness on everything I run dot-wise. But if I come up onto that optic, I have a much more heads-up position, enabling me to see the optic, not crank my neck around, and make me more situationally aware while I look through the optic. But you also have to keep in mind that as you raise your head up higher, it impacts your cheek weld, which is going to impact your actual shooting, because shooting accurately is all about consistency. And if my head is not in a consistent place because I'm way up here looking through a skyscraper optic, might not be shooting as good as I could. Food for thought. Also, once we start jacking up optics, you run into a very unique problem that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. And that is, if you're shooting in a compromised or unconventional position, it is very likely, like think of VTAC barricade, that my optic could be completely obscured and I can't see through it, but my rifle barrel isn't. Or even more detrimental is I can see over this thing, but my muzzle is actually going to hit something out in front of me that I didn't even realize was blocking my muzzle because my optic is so high. So, boom, there you go. Volume 4 add-ons, bolt-ons, performance enhancing devices for all the good little boys and girls and Minutemen in the world. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. Stay tuned, lots more to come. If you got questions, please reach out. I will help you every way that I can, or at least try to get you in the right direction for your information. Again, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and until next time, I'll see you later.